In a landmark decision that will echo through the halls of government and the global economy, the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down President Trump's sweeping global tariffs, known as the Liberation Day tariffs. These tariffs, imposed on a wide range of imports, were among the most controversial trade measures in recent history, sparking fierce debate both at home and abroad. The ruling dismantles a policy that strained international relations and rattled global markets for months. Investors, business leaders and foreign governments had been anxiously awaiting the court's decision, as uncertainty over tariffs sent shockwaves through supply chains and financial markets worldwide. The court found the president exceeded his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, reaffirming Congress's constitutional role in trade. Legal scholars say this decision draws a clear line in the sand, limiting the executive branch's ability to unilaterally reshape the nation's economic relationships. This is more than an economic story, it's a defining moment for the balance of power in American government. The ruling reasserts the foundational principle that no single branch can act without oversight, especially when it comes to matters that affect millions of jobs and the nation's standing in the world. The justices concluded that Congress, not the president, holds the ultimate power to tax and regulate trade, as outlined in Article 1 of the Constitution. This decision not only clarifies the limits of presidential authority, but also strengthens the role of lawmakers in shaping America's economic destiny. The decision signals a return to legislative control over economic statecraft, unless Congress clearly delegates such powers. Lawmakers from both parties are now debating how to move forward, with some calling for new guidelines to prevent future overreach, while others see an opportunity to revisit America's approach to global trade. Businesses are now seeking refunds for billions in tariffs already paid, creating logistical headaches for the government. Companies large and small are scrambling to understand how the ruling affects their bottom lines, while federal agencies brace for a flood of refund claims and legal challenges. The world is watching to see if this marks a return to a more predictable, rules-based approach to global commerce. As America redefines its role in the international trading system, allies and rivals alike are recalibrating their strategies, hoping for stability, but preparing for further change in the evolving landscape of global trade. The Liberation Day tariffs, launched in April 2025, were President Trump's boldest move to reshape global trade. Unlike targeted tariffs of the past, these duties hit goods from over 70 countries, with rates as high as 50%. The policy aimed to force nations to renegotiate trade terms, but the real burden fell on American businesses and consumers, who faced higher prices and tough choices. The tariffs were framed as patriotic, but critics argued they were simply a tax on Americans, disrupting supply chains and raising costs. President Trump claimed the tariffs would level the playing field, but the reality was far more complex. As prices rose, the true cost of the policy became clear to households and companies across the country. Before the tariffs, the U.S. economy was stable, with low unemployment and declining inflation. The sudden imposition of global tariffs shocked the system, driving up inflation and disrupting supply chains. American manufacturers relying on foreign components faced soaring costs, leading to layoffs and reduced competitiveness. Retaliatory tariffs from allies like the EU and Japan hit American exports, escalating a cycle of economic pain. The policy, meant to protect U.S. industry, often hurt it instead, slowing growth, raising prices, and damaging international trust. Most economists agreed the tariffs were a net negative for the U.S. economy. Companies delayed investments, and uncertainty reigned. Instead of liberating the economy, the tariffs left it shackled by higher costs and unpredictability. Legal opposition to the tariffs began immediately, with business groups and importers suing in federal courts. They argued the president lacked authority to impose such broad tariffs without Congress's explicit approval. Lower courts consistently ruled against the administration, finding that IEEPA did not grant the power to create a sweeping tariff regime. The Trump administration appealed, keeping the tariffs in place while the case moved to the Supreme Court. The legal battle was less about trade policy, and more about the separation of powers. Ultimately, the courts framed the issue as a fundamental constitutional question, setting the stage for a historic Supreme Court showdown. President Trump's defense centered on the claim that persistent trade deficits were a national emergency, justifying action under EPA. His team argued the president's foreign affairs powers included imposing tariffs to protect American interests. They portrayed tariffs as a tool of foreign policy, not just a tax. Trump warned that overturning the policy would devastate the U.S. economy, Though experts disputed these claims, critics noted that tariffs are paid by Americans, not foreign governments. The administration's case mixed legal arguments with political rhetoric, painting the president as a decisive protector where Congress had failed. But the court saw this as an overreach, rejecting the idea that trade deficits alone justified such sweeping executive action. The Supreme Court's majority opinion was clear and decisive. Congress, not the president, holds the constitutional authority to regulate commerce and impose tariffs. This foundational principle, rooted in the separation of powers, ensures that the legislative branch remains the primary architect of the nation's economic policy. The justices emphasize that the Constitution deliberately assigns these responsibilities to Congress, reflecting the framers' intent to prevent the concentration of power in any single branch. The court found that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, was never intended to grant the president sweeping authority to create a global tariff system based solely on trade deficits. Instead, IEEPA was designed as a tool for addressing genuine national emergencies, not as a means for the executive branch to unilaterally reshape international trade policy. In reaching its decision, the court invoked the non-delegation doctrine, a constitutional principle that prohibits Congress from handing over its essential legislative powers to the executive without clear and specific guidelines. This doctrine serves as a safeguard, ensuring that the core functions of lawmaking remain with the people's representatives. This landmark decision marks a significant departure from the court's recent tendency to defer to executive authority, especially in matters of foreign policy and commerce. By drawing a firm line, the justices reinforced the importance of maintaining a balance between the branches of government. The court made a clear distinction between the president's constitutional role in diplomacy and Congress's exclusive authority over economic and trade matters. While the president may negotiate and represent the nation abroad, it is Congress that must ultimately decide the rules governing trade. By rejecting the broadest interpretations of presidential power in foreign commerce, the court sent a strong message that the executive branch cannot bypass Congress when it comes to setting tariffs or regulating trade. By striking down the tariffs, the court reaffirmed the constitutional design and robustly defended Congress's domain over economic legislation. This decision was celebrated by lawmakers who saw it as a restoration of legislative authority. Ultimately, the ruling stands as a powerful reminder that the power to tax and regulate trade is a fundamental responsibility of the legislative branch, a cornerstone of American democracy that ensures accountability, transparency, and the rule of law. Financial markets reacted instantly to the Supreme Court's decision, with stocks surging and investors breathing a sigh of relief. Sectors hit hardest by tariffs, like automotive and retail, rallied, while some protected industries saw declines. The agricultural sector hoped for an end to retaliatory tariffs abroad. The dollar weakened slightly as uncertainty eased, yet new questions emerged. Will the government refund billions in collected tariffs? How will this affect future trade policy? The market's response highlighted the deep economic impact of the tariffs and the relief at their removal. The verdict was seen as a win for free trade and a move away from protectionism. For the global economy, it signaled a return to stability and predictability. The Supreme Court's recent decision marks a significant shift in the balance of presidential power, especially when it comes to shaping U.S. trade policy. By clarifying the limits of executive authority, the court has set a new precedent that will influence not only the current administration, but also those that follow for years to come. This ruling signals a move toward greater oversight and accountability in how trade decisions are made at the highest levels of government. By restricting the president's ability to impose tariffs unilaterally, the court is reinforcing Congress's constitutional responsibility to oversee and direct economic policy. This decision reaffirms the importance of checks and balances, ensuring that no single branch can act without meaningful input from the others, especially on issues that impact the entire nation's economy. Laws like the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, will now be interpreted with greater caution. Future presidents may think twice before invoking emergency powers for trade, knowing that the courts are prepared to scrutinize such actions more closely and demand clear justification. As a result, Congress could reclaim a more active and influential role in crafting the nation's trade rules. This shift may end years of executive dominance in trade matters, encouraging more debate, transparency, and collaboration between lawmakers and the White House. The Supreme Court's ruling echoes landmark cases from the past that have set important limits on presidential emergency powers. These decisions have shaped the boundaries of executive authority and continue to influence how power is distributed in Washington. The era of sudden surprise tariffs imposed by the president alone may be drawing to a close. Instead, we could see a more deliberate, transparent process for making trade decisions, one that involves careful review and input from multiple branches of government. For global markets and international partners, this means greater predictability and stability in U.S. trade policy. For the U.S. government, it's a powerful reminder that constitutional checks and balances are not just ideals. They are living principles that continue to shape American democracy. Ultimately, this decision marks a turning point for American trade and the separation of powers, setting the stage for a new era of cooperation, oversight, and respect for the Constitution in shaping the nation's economic future.